What's up, HRV? I'm Araceli Lopez.
And I'm Yarisa Magaña. This week, we wanted to discuss a major issue at HRV, the lack of diversity in advanced classes.
The WhatsUp crew has spent weeks poring over data and working to present an overview of the prevalent problem in our school.
Starting off this episode, we'll be focusing on the class forecasting systems and the opportunities at the high school.
We'll talk to science teachers Mr. Clarkson and Mrs. Davis about the science split and the effects on class demographics.
Then we'll talk to Spanish teacher Mr. Trujillo about diversity in the high school's classrooms as a whole.
Currently, you would be in patterns physics or chemistry as a freshman, and we're trying to make it so that each of those students, no matter what class they're in, could go on to a similar pathway.
The split happens not entirely, but partly based on race lines too, where it's really disproportionate, right? Like I've seen honors chemistry classes that could have one Latino student in them, and like a lot of people have been noticing this for a long time and feeling like, why? Like, why is that?
Some of the things that a lot of our kids that are growing up in Latino households do is, they have other jobs. They're working. We do have kids that, they are able to go home. They're very fortunate to be able to go home. They've got, everything's paid for, rent. They don't have to worry about that. They have their parents that are there working a single job, and they're there from 9 to 5, and then after they're able to come home and take care of their kids. But we have a lot of families that aren't. They aren't able to do that, where they are, like I said, they're working, 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day. Parents are, one's gone during part of the day, another parent's gone during the other part of the day, and the kids are trying to figure out, who's going to make dinner? Well, sometimes the kids have to do that. And it's, taking care of little brothers and sisters or cousins, instead of putting that time towards studying, they've got other things, to do, and that's, I think, one of the things that a lot of students take for granted if you're not put in that situation.
One thing that I try to do in my classroom is to make the science classroom a space where everybody feels included and where everyone can see themselves as a scientist. And I think by building positive relationships with our students, we help them to have a good experience with the curriculum and then see themselves as someone who could move on and take more rigorous classes.
We're grateful these teachers were willing to openly talk about the unequal number of students of color in their classes and how it affects their classroom culture.
The next step was learning more about this issue from the perspective of students.
The question of the week crew asked students what they've noticed about the student demographics in their advanced classes.
So as a student of advanced classes, I feel like they're not representative of the HRVHS student body because the ratio is not what our school consists of, which is like 50% Latinos, and I rarely see people like me in those classes, and I feel like it's important to increase the diversity because STEM consists of collaboration, and I feel like we all have different perspectives to bring to the table.
So I don't think the advanced classes accurately represent the diversity at our school because the minority doesn't get as much opportunity compared to the majority, and it's a problem because we need to be exposed with many perspective of many students coming from a different background and different color races. So we will learn new things preparing for college.
No, I don't think they represent accurately. And it's a problem specifically for the students who are already in those classes. It can feel a little intimidating, and it's hard to be interactive in those classes when you don't feel like you fit in. And it also affects students that might want to go into those classes, but they don't see kids that look like them in those classes, so it might be harder for them to feel encouraged to forecast for them.
Now, to fully understand the depth of the problem, we wanted to break down some of the data that our journalism team has gathered regarding the diversity of advanced classes at our school.
To be able to better understand the diversity problem at our high school, we took data from the 23 AP classes that are currently running in trimester 2 of 2023 and compared it to the student race demographics at the high school, as well as this data and how it looked back in 2018. So the first graph that we have here is the percentage of representative classes in 2023. The 45% blue bar here shows the amount of representative classes right now, compared to the 55% of non-representative, non-diverse classes in 2023. But in the next graph here, we can see that the 2023 data is actually not as good as the 2018 data, as many might expect. The 2018 data shows that there's actually a higher percentage of representative AP classes than there are of non-representative AP classes, classes that fit the demographics of our district. Now, this could be due to the trimester system and unequal splits in class, or it also could be due to COVID and resource differences in the last couple of years. In our third graph here, we can see the distributions of student demographics in the high school. This first set of bars right here shows the demographics and distributions of white students. The two higher bars are what actually shows up in the high school, the number of white students in AP classes, compared to the lower bars to be what we would expect based on the demographics of our high school. Now, if we compared this to the Hispanic student group, where the lower bars are what we actually have and the higher bars are what we would expect out of numbers of Hispanic students, based on demographics of the high schools in AP classes, we can see that there's obviously a problem where we don't have enough diversity in AP classes. The other race groupings on the right here are for races that are not as represented in our district, and it's much harder to make conclusions about those races.
In a recent survey that we've taken, or that we sent out to the classes of 2023, 2024, 2025, and 2026, we got over 100 responses, most saying that from Hispanic students that they felt invisible or that they felt out of place because they weren't white or didn't reflect the majority. A quote that I have, is, "It's mostly white kids, and being Hispanic in those classes feels lonely. I personally feel out of place," said by a 10th grader.
In our final segment of this week's episode, we expanded our search into the greater schools district to learn more about this problem sources.
We interviewed Shayla Moline and Patricia Ortega Cooper to learn more about how the resources are given to the schools depending on language learning requirements and the differences in academic achievements between our two middle schools in our county.
Yeah, we are two different schools with pretty much opposite demographics. As far as funding goes, unfortunately, well, I'm definitely not the expert on the funding piece of it, but I do feel like Y East should be given some extra resources because I do feel like there's more of a need here. Hood River Middle has more advanced math classes. They have a population that has resources, whereas here at Y East, we don't. So I do feel like, I don't know the equation, how the money is allocated, but I'd like to see more resources come to Y East.
I'm going to respond that question based on what I hear from families, because I believe that they are the ones that have the best answer to your question. A couple of things that I have heard from families is that they don't have the same resources at home to support their students with homework, especially if students are in AP classes or in high school. But I think history would testify that the students now in the classes are proven that if we believe in their potential, and then we give them what they need to succeed in those classes, they rise to the occasions. I had this conversation with a student, Hispanic female student, that was in an AP class, and she said, "It was very difficult for me to feel that I belonged in that class. Even though I was selected because I was to the standards of the class, as soon as I went into the class and I looked around, I felt like I didn't belong in the class, so I didn't want to be there. And it took my teacher encouraging me to tell me, you do belong in that class." So when we say that the parents do not want to be part of it, sometimes that stereotype that Hispanic parents do not care about education, that's a lie.
While there are still very obvious problems in the class diversity here, it has been improving much faster in recent years.
With the help of equity measures and student support groups, we are making a positive change.
Thank you for taking a dive with us on this week's episode.
If you want to learn more about this persistent division in our school, please email hrvhs.talent@hoodriver.k12.or.us.
We'd be happy to answer your questions and consider any concerns you may have.
And with that, thanks for watching this episode.
Come back next week and we'll tell you
What's up? Okay, that was better. Yeah.